Hi everyone, welcome to this YouTube channel. Today I am delighted to be speaking with Vic DiCara. Vic is an American astrologer currently living in Japan with his family, who has written numerous books and articles on astrology, among which The Beautifully Rational Philosophy of Astrology, Radically Deep Fundamentals of Astrology, also 27 Stars, 27 Gods. He also did translation of the Bhagavad Gita, a simple Gita, and also he is working on translation of the Taittiriya Brahmana, which is one of the important Vedic texts on nakshatras, which he will be publishing soon. Welcome, Vic.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Vic, I was going through your YouTube channel a couple of months ago. I came across a video where you explained about the 6 classic, topics within Vedantic thinking. It was actually a Q&A, in 2-part Q&A video. And because people started to ask you questions, obviously, when it's such an interesting topic, you never arrived at the last 3 topics. So I thought, okay, this is a good opportunity. I'm starting my channel to ask Vic to talk a little bit about these 6 topics. So that's my question for you, and just go with it as you feel.
Yeah, and then if you have questions about anything that I'm saying, just you jump right in. But I'll base this on Bhagavad Gita, where Arjuna asks, at the end of chapter 7, Krishna really briefly mentions these 6 topics. And then Arjuna says, hey, hang on a second, I'd really like to get your definition of what these things are. And so if you have a background, then you know, like, why did this bit get included in Bhagavad Gita? It's because this is an important topic, because these are like 6 classical terms that are super important in understanding the whole Vedic way of looking at life. So the first, let's see, in Sanskrit, the 6 terms were Brahman, Atman, Karma. And a lot of these words are really, even to this day, to Westerners, everybody's like, oh yeah, Brahman, I heard about that, or Karma especially. Brahman, Atma, Karma, Bhuti, and Daiva and Yagya. So like in English, like you said, it would be like consciousness, individuality, effort, or like not effort, but like action. The creation is Bhuti, the thing that gets created, and then the Daiva is what's the divinity, what's divine, and Yagya is what's the effort, or where should the effort be directed.
Yes.
Right. So should we start off with Brahman?
That's a reasonable thing to do.
Yeah, it's a really good place to start off. The Vedanta Sutra starts by saying Tato Brahman Jigyasa. Now you should ask about Brahman. That's how the summary of the Vedas starts. And that means, like, now that you can use words, now that you're a human being, you can think in sophisticated ways, you should ask about this subject.
Also, Vic, whether you speak about love or free will or karma, dharma, sex and sexuality, topics that you've been going through in your big questions, it seems always to come back to that foundation. Please,
I think, like, let's say if you're like a Jungian astrologer or something, or like if you're a Western astrologer, well, then you have certain advantages because you have, like, let's say, like a modern astrologer, maybe they were a psychology major in the university or something. There's certain advantages. They understand psychology. They understand how to talk to people. So what advantage do we have as a Vedic astrologer? Like, it's not really that we have like modern psychological techniques. Actually, we're kind of usually fumble around with those a bit. But we have Vedic philosophy and the Vedic way of looking at life. That's like in our toolbox of how do you explain this to a person? Yeah, okay, the guy's got Mars in the 7th house in Cancer. Fine, if any astrology student just knows the implication of that, if they just, but how, the real trick in being an astrologer is how do you explain this to a person? And how do you help the person thrive or prosper with this? Right?
Yes.
So for that, you need to reach into your toolbox. It's not a part of astrology. It's a part of your toolbox of how you're going to communicate the stuff that you got from astrology. And that's what the Vedic philosophy is. It's a great big toolbox for doing that.
Wonderful.
Right. Mm-hmm. So Brahman, see, this is the basic difference between Vedic worldview and kind of the modern prevalent worldview. The modern prevalent worldview is, wow, there's a big universe out there. Mm-hmm. And we're a tiny dot in it. And we it created us. There's a huge, vast, expansive universe, and we like evolved in it, and we got created by it. The Vedic point of view is like exactly the opposite. It's that you are this vast, humongous, amazing thing, and all the stuff that's in the universe is actually a product or byproduct of stuff that you do. And you create. So the way that Krishna defines Brahman, he says, Aksharam Paramam Brahman. That Brahman is Parama. It's the Parama, like paramount. It's like the super most significant thing. Akshara is the thing that's the foundation or the basis for everything else. Like, it's pretty cool. It's very simple philosophy, actually, and even kids can totally understand this. Like, I've explained this to my kids and they just get it. Like, reality is something that you experience, right? That's what the definition of reality is, something that you can experience. Yes. So reality is impossible unless there's somebody to experience it. So you can't have the experiencer be a product of reality. Like the modern concept is consciousness pops out of some combination of molecules.
Yes, and from the brain, right? The reductionist
or over the course of evolution, you get heliums come together, they make hydrogens come together, they make heliums, you get those come together, they make the next molecule. Eventually you get some kind of spark and it makes a tissue, and it makes a synapse, and then all of a sudden you have thoughts. So the way that we think these days is that reality has produced consciousness.
Yes.
But the way what the Vedas is saying is that's impossible. Reality is the thing that's experienced by consciousness. So consciousness is the basis for it. So that changes your whole life, even if you just get that. All of a sudden, you're not really so scared of an astrology reading anymore, because you're creating your world. Right? You're Brahman, you're consciousness, you're creating the things that you want to experience. The problem is you're just not so good at it. We're just not that good at it. Like, it's like a video game. Like, some people are really good at video games. They go around to kill everybody else. They get all the gold coins. Super Mario gets super big, right? Some people are really good at that game. Some people are not so good at that game. But it's a game. You're playing it. If you get good at it, you can get, you can get all the goals you want to get from it. So that's life too. We just are not playing along with the game the right way. And that's why there's like disadvantageous results coming our way that we have fear of or that we suffer from. But you don't have to feel like there's nothing you can do, because actually you are the basis for reality. You're producing it. And then it also gets rid of like a sense of boredom or a sense of I don't have what I want. Because everything in the world is so interesting because it's a product of Brahman. Everything in the world is so valuable because it's a product of Brahman. Even a piece of junk that's just sitting on your couch for 4 days. So that's the first thing. The first thing is it's a whole different worldview than what we're kind of ingrained in the modern way that we got born. It's a worldview. It's not that life is produced by something else, but that life produces everything else.
Yes.
Make sense?
Perfectly. It makes sense. It's a concept, and I think it's the whole point is to discover that really, deeply, and to experience that perspective as well. Yes. Yeah.
Actually, so if you don't understand that point, you can read the Vedas for 553 years, and you're just going to think that it's about rain and lightning storms and weird stuff, snakes. But when you understand that point, then you'll catch certain words and everything will make sense, a lot more sense. And then when you look at the Upanishads, it'll be, it's obvious now. It's totally, they're really, really directing you. You have to understand Brahman. All right. So then the next topic that Krishna mentioned was something called Atma, and it's sequential. Right. So the way that he explained Atma was Swabhavo Adhyatmana. The nature of Atma is that it's Swabhav. It has its own Swabhava being. It has its own, it has some sense of Swa, which is self. Swa is like, there's no English word for Swa, but in Japanese we have one, Jibun. It's like, and the way they translate Jibun from Japanese to English is like one's own. Like mine. Like in English we switch it up a lot. Like you have mine, yours, his, hers. But that whole thing together is like Swa. Possessive sense, self-possessive. So Atma then is something which has a selfhood. Now, how is that related to Brahman? Because where does selfhood or individuality come from? It comes from so what is Brahman? Brahman is consciousness. That word Brahm means to comprehend.
Yes.
So Brahman is consciousness. What consciousness can do is perceive things. That's what it does. It doesn't do anything else. It doesn't directly do anything else. It just perceives. So, but what happens if you perceive? Then you create some specificity. That's what the word Atma means, specificity. You're looking at something. You're perceiving something. You're experiencing something. So now you are something, and the thing that you're experiencing is something else. And there's some kind of merger of the two, but your perception of it. So the Atma is this permanent nature of Brahman. Brahman is consciousness, but when Brahman is not like the words when or as soon as or anything like that fail.
Sure.
But Brahman is consciousness, and when it perceives, which is always, it's Atma. Consciousness perceives, and by perceiving it becomes unique. Because think about like somebody on YouTube is watching this from India, somebody else is watching it from America, right? So everybody is watching the same thing from a different spot, and that gives us individuality.
Yes.
So like you say, point of view, perspective, all that stuff happens as soon as one bit of Brahman experiences another bit of Brahman. And people try to juggle words and say, well, Brahman can just experience itself. Well, fine. When Brahmanic, that's exactly what it is. By Brahman experiencing itself, it's exhibiting its independent. It becomes an observer and an observed. But the words becomes are wrong. It fails. The nature of Brahman is to observe itself always. It always does that. That's what it always does.
So there's no sequence involved. That's what you're saying.
There's no like chronological sequence. There's like an ontological sequence, maybe. Like consciousness is the really substrate, and then its performance like generates, but eternally generates, perpetually generates the individuality. You can't shut it off. You can't shut it off. Like some people will say, well, see, that was the mistake. We became individuals. We should go back to being whole. We should go back to being like whole, which is kind of the right concept, but it's not by destroying your individuality that you become whole. It's by perfect perception of the object that you become unified with it. If you cease to be a perceiver, then there's no one to become one with anything else. Everything just becomes latent, nothing. So you go far off into like Zen kind of Buddhism, or Advaita Vedanta, which is just like everything just becomes latent zero.
Like I said, kind of nihilism almost.
Right. Which is not really indigenous Vedic thinking. It's a minority school developed by Shankar after Gautama Buddha, it served a purpose, because Gautama Buddha said, you guys don't understand the Vedas at all. Just stop following the Vedas and listen to me. Just don't hurt other things. And that lasted for a couple of centuries. And then Shankar came and said, well, the Vedas are pretty important. Now Buddha's followers, because he said forget the Vedas, if somebody asked him about, well, what is Atman or what is Brahman, he would say, I got nothing to say about that. Because you can't say anything about it. Your eyes look out, your ears hear outward. You can't experience Brahman unless you have a guide, and the Vedas are the guide to point your perception inward. So he would say, I can't answer that question for you because I'm telling you not to look at the Vedas. So his followers went on to say that means there's nothing to explain, and they developed this philosophy that it's zero. Everything is zero. You just hear it for an instant, but it's actually zero. And so Shankara developed a way of getting Buddhist thinking people back into the Vedas because 0 and 1 are very close. So he said, well, it's not all zero. And the logic of it all being zero is really impossible to establish because 1 doesn't come from 0. 0 is just 0 and it's always 0. You could split 1 into smaller parts, but you can't split 0 into smaller parts. So there was no way to establish Buddhism as a logical way of thinking. So Shankara came, and the Nyayakas came a little bit before Shankara and said, we got to get rid of this illogical stuff and go back to the Vedas. But Shankara brought the Vedas back in, but he just took selective bits out of it that would support the idea that everything is one. There's no individuality at all. But then after Shankar, there was another development. It was Madhvacharya. Madhva came and said, no, now that you guys are used to accepting the Vedas again, let's look at the whole Vedas instead of just these cherry-picked statements that Shankara did. And there's oneness, there's diversity in the oneness. And so he kind of reestablished the full Vedantic picture. Okay? Sorry, that's pretty
It's very clear. It's very clear.
Yeah? Okay. Yeah. So that's Brahman and Atman. Then now it gets really interesting. Oh, well, it's pretty interesting already, but for me, it gets really interesting here.
Sure.
Because Brahman is consciousness, so it's easy to understand that it perceives, that's what it does. But the third topic shows that it does something else. And this relates to a lot of fundamental concepts in any kind of mystic tradition, and astrology included, which is that there's like a balance of incoming and outgoing. So like there's yin, yang, and there's like male, female. So there's the basic like Venus and moon coming in and Mars and sun going out, kind of masculine, feminine energies. So it's down there in the root of Brahman to have this in and out nature to it. Polarity, a male pole and a female pole. It's in Brahman, unified in Brahman. So the third topic then is karma. Krishna mentioned karma, and Arjuna says, well, give me your definition of what karma is. So Krishna says it's Bhuta bhavod bhavo karo karma. Bhuta bhavod bhavo karo visarga karma sangita. That karma is known as the thing that causes the thing that causes the stuff.
So it's a chain. It's a chain. Yeah.
It's a chain.
Yeah.
It's a way for the previous topic, for the Atma, to cause a chain of events that cause the next topic, Bhuta. Yeah. So what Brahman can do is Brahman cannot just perceive outward, cannot just perceive in, like taking in, but it can also exert will.
Yes.
It can exert some influence or effect on itself. And that by exerting an effect on itself, it can transmute itself into permutations or different things that have different forms. That's called Bhuta.
Matter.
So so karma is like an inherent shakti or power of Atma, the individual. It's not just like in astrology or just a common Indian thinking is karma is the fate that's coming to you as a result of what you did before. But that's just the chain part. Bhuta bhavod bhava. It's a chain of a cause and effect. But the origin of the chain is the will.
Yes. Yeah. Very important. Yeah.
That's super important. So again, that's very empowering.
Yes.
It's very empowering that you have caused it's very empowering that you can change your future, but it's also kind of humbling that you have caused your present.
Yeah, Yes, it puts the responsibility on the person in the first
Yeah.
place. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
And that's a good thing, also an important thing in anybody's toolbox as an astrologer or trying to understand an astrology reading is to get them to take responsibility.
Yes.
Or to be willing. If you're listening to the reading, you have to be willing to take responsibility and not expect a magic ring or a magic mantra or a magic puja to just change your life automatically overnight. And things like that. Or just because some sadhu blesses you, then all of a sudden you're going to become, you have 16 children and you marry and you get 5 raises. It's not going to happen. You know, you create your destiny. Even if a sadhu, a great, powerful spiritual person blesses us,
yeah,
the manifestation of the blessing is in the changing of our action.
yes.
Right? If
Absolutely.
you go ahead and read Puranas and see how it happens, it's not just like people get hit on the head with a blessing feather and then all of a sudden they become manifest. They make some effort. Okay, yeah, so that's very interesting that karma is a power that the individual possesses to be able to create different things, different situations. Make sense so far?
Absolutely. Yes, so that
Right.
karma, yes, creates then, it sets off a certain direction. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's also interesting because once you set off a certain direction, it's gone. It's going that way. So it's not like free will. The concept of free will might be a confusing term, depending on how you understand the word free will. Like if you just think free will means you, like my daughter loves to say, I'll do anything I want, whenever I want, okay? She wants to have free will, but you can't have free will. You can't just do whatever you want, whenever you want. Like you think, oh, today I want to be a giraffe. Poof, your body changes into a giraffe. It doesn't happen. Tomorrow I want to be Marilyn Monroe. Next day I want to be Leonardo DiCaprio. Why can't that happen? If you're Brahman and by your will you create karma to change the manifest thing, then why can't you be Marilyn Monroe one day and Leonardo DiCaprio the next? Because there's a chain of cause and events. It has to go through a chain. The Brahman, what we really are is something very, very, very unsolid. We're really not a solid thing. We're a perceiver. We can manifest solid, tangible things to perceive, but it takes some steps. A little tiny blip has to change another tiny blip in an electron, and then that has to change another thing, and gradually it ripples out and makes an arm move. And that arm maybe swings a hammer or something and builds something. So in that way, like consciousness is moving the matter, but not immediately and directly through a long chain of cause and effects. And so that's the other thing that you have to realize when you're dealing with your own personal fate is if it's set in motion going this way, you can eventually change it to go over here instead of going over here. But you have to continually make an effort. It's not just wherever you want it to go, it immediately goes there. It's not free will like that. Yeah, like an example can be if you're really mean to somebody, and then the next moment you want to be their friend again. It just doesn't happen like that. You know, you have to do something to atone for, or it has to wear off. The effect of what you did that was really mean has to wear off first before you can switch it over to something new. So people have to learn also to have patience and perseverance. That's why the third house is very important. And Mars, that's what the beneficial effect of the third house in Mars is that they're going to get, and Saturn, that they're going to give us the tenacity and the perseverance that you have to achieve anything great. They in themselves are not really particularly enjoyable or wonderful, Mars or Saturn. They're kind of grumpy or tough or strict, but they give you the ability to achieve the great things, which is self-discipline and tenacity. Yeah, and the third house is the same thing. And maybe the third and sixth. So what do you get as a result of karma? You get the fourth topic, which is Bhuta. And the way Krishna defines Bhuta was ksharam.
Vic, I have one question about karma.
Yeah.
So let's say like you lose a child, for example, like the worst thing that can happen to anybody. yeah, what is that all about? Is it a retribution, or is it something that propels you to detach deeply and to, make the journey back, so to speak, or is it a punishment, or also I'm thinking about, if you think about karma and our Newtonian world of the linearity of it, of time also, but according to quantum physics, there's this whole different dimension to it, like non-linearity. And if you then also reflect back on what karma is, and because we also say it's action, and actions create reactions, and so on. So it's I think there's a lot of confusion involved as well. See, so if my child leaves me, I'm obviously in tremendous pain. Is it because I've done something in the past that makes me experience this great suffering, or is it pushing through? Is it an act of grace almost, if you will, to really detach from objects, like for example your child, for example, because it's going to die anyway? But I mean, yes.
That's it. Yeah. So first, just on the idea of karma as action, and then to this heavy. The root word for karma is kri. So kri doesn't really mean action, but it means to initiate. Like Kritika. Kritika is the first nakshatra, and the god is Agni, the first. Agni literally means first goer. The igniter, the ignition. So karma is really the initiation of a chain of events, which sets a thing. So let's say if something bad happens to you. Well, is it a punishment or is it a opportunity? It's both. Why don't you? People should try to think that punishments are the opportunity. And it goes down to the way children think about parents. If you want to see how people think about life, just look at the way children think about parents, because we're all just kids in relation to this whole big gigantic universe. So a lot of times when a parent gets angry with the child for a reasonable reason, right? Like, let's say the child is intentionally not listening to you. Kids do this a lot. And you raise your voice and you get mad. Listen to me. I'm telling you to come downstairs and eat. Oh, I hate daddy. The kid will, feel like that. I hate daddy. He's so mean. Why is he making me eat? I want to play with Legos right now. So the kid's attitude towards the parent is, what's this mean stuff the parent's doing to me? But the parent's attitude towards the kid is, look, I need you to eat on time. I need you to, I'm taking care of you. So that's what it is on a bigger scale when you have bad things happen to you, so-called bad things. It feels to the kid like this is a bad thing. Why am I suffering this pain? Why have I lost this thing that I love, or this person that I love? So it's I'm not trying to sugarcoat it and say that it's a blessing. It's a punishment.
Yes.
But the punishment is not from an evil parent. The punishment is from a universe that's trying to help you grow and see and experience. And if you think, I couldn't possibly deserve this, then that's just a self-defense mechanism that you actually need to get rid of. Because you could possibly deserve it, because look at all the horrible things that everybody does all the time. There's Hitlers out there. There's mass murderers. There's killers out there. So of course there's going to be retribution of that to those same souls. And this cycle perpetuates itself. So you just get awful people doing awful things to other people, and then its cycle just repeats itself. Unless you can let go. Unless somebody says, hey, look, you're just caught up in this cycle of karma. Don't react to this hatefully and spitefully. And don't react the way you're being impelled to react. You want to kill somebody because you're angry. Get off that. That's just because somebody killed you in your last life. And if you do that again, you're going to get killed in your next life. You ruined somebody's life in your previous life. You ruined something with their child's life, and in this life, your experience of children is getting really painful. But don't gripe about that. Take care of it. You know, take care of what you do have, or value what you did have, or something, or make it better. Make the effort to make it better. That's the only way that you don't just keep on going in a karmic wheel. That's that Bhuta Bhavod Bhavo Karo. It just keeps going. Because then the Kara, the Bhuta, which is created, is then the thing that the Atma experiences. And then it reacts to the experience, and it makes another chain that's just going to be a bigger wheel on the same theme. So unless we use our will to say, I'm going to get out of this cycle, we don't ever get out of it.
Yeah, it's also when an event like this happened, the really heavy things, that the ego becomes so shocked, that it kind of is or thrown into a humble spot,
Yeah.
And there's been some things here in the country I live, 15, 20 years ago, with some children missing and this kind of thing. And I know someone close to me who talked with the father of one of the girls that was murdered. And I mean, like 10 years later or something. And she said that, he really had given it a place in his life, because you never overcome this kind of grief. But she could feel something was broken something was broken, clearly, but there was so much authenticity and a compassion felt in his presence. And see, and I think that's very interesting. It's like something took over, something from his deep subconscious regions kind of blessed him at the same time, even though he was on a personal level, he was going through, obviously a tremendous ordeal. So, yeah.
I think he must have actually made an effort to try not to die himself, because when you get hit by grief like that, you just don't want to exist anymore. So he must have made a significant effort to get out of that cycle.
That's what he did.
Seems to have worked. But then you carry a scar from your encounters with the crap that we've generated from our karma. We carry scars with it. Those are actually called samskaras. The word scar actually is Sanskrit in origin.
Mm-hmm.
And they sit in your mind. They're mental scars or emotional scars that can make you prone to act in a certain way again. That's called the seed of the next karma. So you have to be careful with those. The ways that people treat you are going to tend to make scars in our mind and in our heart that are going to make us treat other people this very similar or some kind of reflection of the way that we got treated, unless we actually do some introspection to think about it. That's why most of the Vedic, recommendations is you should meditate, calm down, think about what you're feeling. Don't just act on it. All right. Yeah, that's an interesting topic. I mean, I remember a long time ago, I wrote an article called "Does Karma Kill Compassion?"
Mm-hmm.
Because this is another thing. Like, if you think, well, it's just a chain of reaction. So this guy lost his daughter, but I don't have to feel much sympathy for him, because the only reason why he lost his daughter is because in a past life he must have done something horrible to somebody's daughter.
Yes, that's what I was hinting at. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So actually, that's just an ignorant way of looking at it, because it's very ignorant, because the nature of Brahman is not to suffer. This is a really interesting thing that's also very deep in Vedic philosophy. Krishna doesn't mention it in this part, but it's like the nature of Brahman is rasam, or ananda.
Ananda, yes.
Which is bliss and experience of something blissful.
Mm-hmm.
You think about it, it only makes sense. If Brahman is consciousness, then what does it exist for? It exists to be conscious of something, right? Consciousness without an object to be conscious of is useless. It's like money without a store to spend it on.
Mm-hmm.
So consciousness wants an object to be conscious of, and it doesn't want a dime store thing to be conscious of. It wants something really cool. So the way that it works well, when Brahman, uses its atmic nature and the karma shakti, it produces bhutas that are really glorious. produces things that are really wonderful to experience. So, however, we're here and we're suffering practically on a daily basis from all the mistakes that we made. So to say, well, that's just your mistake. You made this mistake, and I feel no sympathy for that, is to be completely ignorant of the spiritual picture. The spiritual picture is you totally don't deserve to be suffering at all. You're Brahman. You're supposed to be experiencing joy at every moment that increases all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the specifics of what happened are less important to a person who sees things that way. Like the specifics of this person got into a car crash, that person didn't. The people that have smaller vision tend to think the person that didn't is super lucky and the person who did is super unlucky. But with the bigger spiritual vision, you start to think, yeah, but is either of them happy?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you feel compassion for both of them, or you feel happy for both of them if any one of them is actually spiritually progressive and is moving towards happiness. So that's the thing with karma. It's not a coldness that you think, well, you deserve this, I'm not going to help you. You want to actually get people out of the cycle of karma. That's how a spiritually minded Vedic person thinks. Their
I
heart
think
is not.
it's also one of the things that, because you often mention this, like the word karma and this kind of thing is rather used cheaply, these days. And I think it's also, people, it's your karma, right? It's my fault also. There's a lot of shame and guilt involved as well. So I think it's good in that sense also to clarify these important terms.
Yeah.
There's so much psychology involved as well. People kind of, or they judge others, or in first place themselves. And
Well, this is another thing too. If you have a small vision, then you can see, look, this person is ugly in this life, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So they must have bad karma. They must have done bad things. That's like a real simple thing that you can read in astrology books or in the Vedas. It's true. They're going to say, if you're born with a big, like wart on your face, well, that's because you did such and such in your last life. But you have such a small view. You're just seeing the person in this life and in the last life. Think about bigger view. There's nothing that I have not done. There's no horrendous thing that I have not done. Me, personally. I've done every horrendous thing, from murdering people. I've done everything terrible in my lives.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that now some of the good things that I've done are affecting me. And in the next life, every one of us has done everything good and everything bad. So because we're eternal, it's not even like people sometimes say, how many lives have you had? That's all a bunch of bunk, according to Vedanta. Yes. You don't begin. If you notice, Brahman doesn't begin at any point. It's the substrate for everything else. That's the next topic that we're going to go to. Mm-hmm. Brahman doesn't begin at any point, but it's the substrate for things that begin. So you don't begin. You've always been. You are the basis for reality. You don't have any number of lives. You constantly exist. So you've done everything, been as horrible as you could possibly be as saintly as you could possibly be.
Yeah, because also, like, if you look at saints, sages, how would they understand deeply? How would they know if they haven't experienced it themselves? Obviously, it's logic, simple logic.
Yeah. Okay, so the next topic then. Otherwise, we're going to have the same phenomenon happen.
Please.
The next topic is Bhuta. So if you just ask an Indian person what Bhuta means, they might say ghost. Because it's interesting, because Bhuta means something that has been. Mm-hmm. So it's different than Brahman, which is something that always is. So the reason why you can use the word Bhuta to refer to ghost means this used to be a person.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the way Krishna defines it. He just contrasts it with Brahman. With Brahman, he just said it was akshara, and with Bhuta, he's going to say it's kshara. Akshara, kshara. Mm-hmm. One is not decaying, and the other one is decaying. But he already gave more explanation of Bhuta previously. He said Bhuta bhavod bhavakaro karma. That the karma results in something Bhuta. Bhuta is past, like past perfect. Yeah, past perfect tense of bhu, which means be. Mm-hmm. So bin, something that got made. That's what Bhuta means. So all the stuff all of the stuff that gets made, it's going to be unmade. But it's all related to something eternal. Like now you're you and now I'm me. It's not that it's totally irrelevant to who we are. The real us made these forms. But it's not permanently this form. We're not permanently going to be these guys. It's just like for now. And then the next time around will be something else. We manifest the form that we actually kind of want, but you manifest the form that you want, but as far as you can by the momentum of the actions that you've already set in motion. Like I said, let's say if you want to be, what's his name?
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah. I picked. All right, so let's say you want to be Leonardo DiCaprio. Well, you can do that. You can be as handsome and talented and everything, and rich and famous as Leonardo DiCaprio. You can't do it immediately because you have some momentum of all the things you wanted before, or you deserved, or you did wrong before that are pushing away from that. Every act, it's just like with Newtonian physics, every act generates a little like reaction that has momentum to it. And so one way to understand karma is by thinking about momentum.
Mm-hmm.
An action that you do sets a chain of events in effect, and that chain of events has momentum. You have to gradually reel it in to push it to become the thing that you want it to be. So people are obsessed with the Bhutas because this is what our whole mind-body complex is designed to experience is Bhutas.
Mm-hmm.
People want to, that's every 99.9% of what people want to know from an astrologer is something that has to do with some kind of a Bhuta. Am I going to get married? Am I going to have kids? Am I going to be sick? What kind of person am I? Even those questions. What kind of person am I? Am I going to be happy tomorrow or next year? What should I do? Is even a Bhuta question. Because it's all just talking about the manifested form. What should I do in this life, in this body right now at this point in time? And so, I noticed that fear happens when you think something is real. Fear gets amplified when you think something is really, really, really big and important. When something is really small, it's trivial, you don't really get that afraid of it, even if it's yucky or, like a tiny, what are those little bugs? Like a tiny, like gnat or something. Mm-hmm. They're probably just as ugly as a big, gigantic spider, but nobody gets that scared of them because they're just small. But you get a big furry spider, then everybody gets really grossed out and scared. So like the size of the thing that affects how much we hate it and how fearful we are of it. So we all tend to think that the things that are happening in our manifest world are super, super, super important. And that's why we're very, very afraid of things that will go wrong or anxious if we're going to do the right thing or not. But if you have a little bit of a Vedic background to help you with that, you can say, you know what, this is going wrong right now in my life, and I'm going to be in this such and such dasha for this many years, or this transit is going to be affecting me for this many months or years. But it's just a Bhuta. It's just something that comes and goes and that I produce, and then it goes away. I can outlast this. I can survive this. That's what I am. I'm the thing which outlasts everything else. So I can deal with this. Because, people a lot of times practically in giving readings to people, I'll be thinking, great, this is going to be over in 3 years. And they're like, 3 years? Can't handle this for 3 years.
Exactly, yes.
Because I'm so used to seeing things like on the astrological scale, or I have like my background and what I've studied with the Vedas. To me, 3 years, although if it was in my life for 3 years, I would probably feel similar to how they feel. But to me, 3 years feels like, well, you got lucky. You don't have like a 16-year dasha coming up with like this horrible junk on this. Honestly, but even if it's 16 years, just 16 years. What is time is just not really anything more than one moment going to the next. It's not like years and so forth. Time is just one moment changing to the next. So
yes,
it's just how.
And it's also I mean, I think if you have a long dasha coming, which is going to be negative, you have a lot of time to change yourself. I mean, that's the whole point of that, of course, which is, I think, is also important to look at astrology, not to really change things, but because in the beginning, I tend to do that, like just you're going to get over it and this kind of thing very soon. But at the same time, you can look at it as you have the time to, because the karma or the indication of the planets here shows how you must change. I mean, what is required for you to become more happy and more fulfilled in life. So it's an opportunity in that sense, and not as a mere concept explaining that, but really emphasizing it, like that's really the reality. And then, of course, it's very handy to have a philosophical foundation, which is that of consciousness permeates everything, and it's so I understand.
Yeah, that's another thing we could take away from this. Like, if you see something that you don't want is in your life, you think about this paradigm of Brahman, Atma, Karma, and Bhuta. The thing that you don't want or that you wish that you had, it's a Bhuta. You can change that. You can manifest it or get away from it, but it's going to take some Bhuta bhavod bhavakaro to do that. It's going to take some tenacity and some work and some patience for us to be able to change the tangible situations like being unemployed or whatever, etc. The thing that you can change right away is your swabhav, the way that you look at the thing. The Atma is the Atma because it looks at things a certain way. So you have actually free will. If your mind is under your control, if you practice a little bit of mental discipline and your mind is under your control, then you can have free will about how you can perceive things. Let's just say it might not be free or something, but it's a lot easier than changing the manifest world, is to change your perception of it. And by changing your perception of it, you're going to eventually change that manifest world. But by never changing your perception of it, that's not going to change. The cycle is just going to replicate itself in a different way, in a different form. You leave it over here and it'll pop up over there.
Yes, you align yourself in the right manner, from the right perspective of how things really are.
Yeah. And this also cracks me up a little bit in a sad way. Like Vedic astrology is not really known as being up to this point. It's changing at this point, but up to this point, Vedic astrology hasn't been known as being like psychologically oriented. It's supposed to be more predictive, etc., or just practical. But the sad thing is the Vedic worldview is the most deeply psychologically useful.
Yes.
It's so psychologically useful. It's better than anything you can learn in a university about psychology. Well, there's basic principles that you learn about psychology from the Veda. So, yeah, it's very important to like actually make a psychological shift in your attitude. So then we have two more topics. The fifth one is Daiva. This is an interesting one. Krishna says Purushas Charidaivata. So the word Purusha is a word that usually means person. It literally means like the king. Puru is like a city, and Sha means like the steward of the city. So this is also a common Vedic metaphor, is that your body is a city, and the soul is not the king, but the steward. Because it can't be the king because it doesn't possess it. Because it's it's not entirely in our grasp. Our body is not entirely in our grasp, but it's a steward. The soul is a steward of the body. And so that's what Purusha means. It means like the steward of a city. So it refers to like a person, a whole person. The city and the ruler together. So he says, Arjuna asks him, what's divinity? Daiva means divine. What's divine? What's God? And Krishna says, people. Purusha. People are God. Personhood is divinity. And actually, it's perfect sense, even if you have a Christian concept like, no, God is the guy who created everything. People aren't God, but God is the one that created everybody. But look at the previous four topics. The previous four topics was there's consciousness. It's you, Atman. You're consciousness. You're a specific aspect of Brahman, through your ability to exert karma, to initiate things, you create Bhutas. So you're God. You create the Bhutas. You create the world. So even in a it doesn't even like contradict the basic religious world idea of what's God. He's the creator of heaven and earth, blah blah. But it makes it way more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like, well, we all participate in this creation of what the world is, and that's the Vedas have a concept of Atmas and another related term, which is Paramatma.
Yes.
That there's a super individual who makes interaction between the sub individuals possible and provides like a unified field. I don't know if that's the right in science what unified field might mean, but the Paramatma in Vedic translated terms, field means like the place where you live, the place where you operate,
Mm-hmm.
and the Atmas have their field. But each Atma's field is kind of separated.
Yes.
It's small, it's separated, but there's a Paramatma that lets the fields interact. It synchronizes the field and lets them all interact with each other. So like there's a super individual also. And so that is also can be referred to as Purusha. If you read like old Vedic texts, a lot of times they'll just use the word Purusha for God.
Yes.
So just instead of saying Bhagavan or something, which is like more like a Puranic way of addressing God, they'll say Purusha.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so personhood is divine because people have the ability to perceive and interact and therefore create and change reality.
That's a completely different view from, mainstream science. Well, I shouldn't say that, but, the worldview of, we come into existence because of, some random mutations and merely bringing it back to that is disempowering, I would say. It also leaves a little to the imagination as well. And so the magical world kind of disappears from that, which I think is sad.
Yeah, and this also reflects in Vedic cosmology.
Mm-hmm.
The variance between Vedic cosmology and modern cosmology is so fascinating. It's so widely variant. But they don't even talk about and people who don't get it will think that like the Vedas are talking about aliens or people on other planets or something, but the Vedas really doesn't have a concept of like other planets. It's like there's a realm in which we exist and there's multiple layers in that realm in which we exist, and there's vastness outside, surrounding it, producing it, like space. But like the modern cosmological worldview makes you feel so small.
Yes.
But the Vedic view is like, what Vedic view will really do, because it actually says aniyam aniyor mahimam mahimor, something like that. That Brahman is smaller than anything small, smaller than the smallest thing, and bigger than the biggest thing too.
Mm-hmm.
So what the Vedic kind of worldview will say, yeah, but size doesn't matter. That's what you'll get out of the Vedic worldview. Like, so what, this universe is big. It's a big bunch of empty space, just that it just existed to produce life. And here it is, I'm alive. And whether or not there's a billion light years of galaxies and whatnot doesn't make a difference to me. I live in this room. And this is my field is this room, and I need to pay attention to this room and it's not like a feeling of like, no, this is small, this is so unimportant. It's very important, every little detail. It's not only is Brahman greater than great, like not only is it light years and galaxies and all these things, it's also smaller than small.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't matter if you go big, small, or anywhere in between, everything is equally important. Then we have one final topic.
Mm-hmm.
Final topic is Yagya. It's a very important word, not only in Vedanta, but throughout the Vedas. It's like almost finished with the Taittiriya Brahmana and Nakshatra Sutra, and Yagya, the word Yagya comes up so many times.
Mm-hmm.
So common, if you just ask somebody or like look it up, what word Yagya means, Yajna, usually it's spelled. you'll probably hear it says sacrifice. There's a sacrifice, a Vedic sacrifice. The various types of yagyas. They sacrificed grains, or they sacrificed animals, or they sacrificed butter. But it really misses the point of what yagya really is. Yagya is the effort, a concerted effort to produce a result is a yagya. That's why it is a ceremony, because that's what its Vedic ceremony is. The sacrifice is a concerted effort. We want to produce a certain result. Like we want better rains this year than last year. So we have all these, we have to build an altar like this, and we have to do mantras like that. There's various like magical things that you do. Well, what does all that break down to? It's a concerted effort to produce a result. That's how the authors of the Vedic things were thinking of their sacrifice. They weren't thinking of it as a hocus pocus or ceremony or an irrelevant ceremony. They were thinking, this is our concerted effort. So when Krishna defines what yagya is, he's talking about what should you apply your efforts to. And it's coming at the end of this whole sequence of topics. He explained Brahman, it's consciousness. Atma, it's the individuality inherent in consciousness. Karma, it's what that individuality results in. Action, interaction. And that interaction and action results in Bhuta, which is it actually manifests stuff and changes stuff and makes things interesting. And then he says, see, that's divine. That's why it's called divine, because it creates reality. Mm-hmm. And then finally he's going to say, look, you got this amazing toolbox. I keep using this word toolbox. You're this amazing creature. You're this divine creature that can create reality. The sixth topic is, well, what the hell should I do with it? What should I just keep on baking chocolate chip cookies, or is there something? But like I said, I've been everywhere. I've done everything. I've baked every cookie that I could bake. I've tried every awful thing I could try. I've tried every good thing I can try, and I'm still looking for something.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So where is my effort? I have all this great potential to manifest things and experience things, but what should I be focused on? That's what the sixth topic is. And the crazy, like the thing that the mind-blowing way that he answers it is, he says, that's me. But the way that he says it is, now here I forget the Sanskrit, but he's saying something about dehe and dehina. And then he says ma, he includes himself at the end. So he gives a chain of things that you would put your efforts towards. Mm-hmm. The first thing he says is, naturally, you should put your efforts towards your world, your deha, your body. Take care of your body, take care of your world. But then he says, but in order to do that really well, you have to take care of dehi. The deha is your world and your body and your stuff. But if you really want to take good care of your body and your world, take care of the dehi, the thing that sustains it. Like if you want to take good care of your television, you probably also want to take good care of the electrical supply to it. You don't want to have a crappy electrical supply that goes off, or the plugs are bad, or it spikes and blows up your TV. Otherwise, even if you're keeping the TV nice and clean, it's not going to serve its purpose. It's not going to work well. So he said you can direct your divinity towards trying to make your world and your body and everything really exactly what you want, but it's more fruitful to direct it towards the mental and emotional stuff that's supporting it, that's mm-hmm. generating it. And that's all based on who you really are, your consciousness. So your endeavor should really be to understand yourself as consciousness, not as a Bhuta. Not just to understand yourself as a manifested, temporarily manifest thing, although he says do it. Understand that temporarily manifested thing. It's not irrelevant. It's going to show you, it's the entryway.
Yes.
Towards yourself. But go in deeper to find the thing that's manifesting it. Look, try to instead of seeing out with your eyes, try to see in. Try to see into what's the Atma of the Atma, what's the self of the self. And it says, and if you look in far enough, you'll see me. So he says, I'm that Paramatma who's supporting all of you and giving you this ability to have a shared experience. And I've got my own. Then when you see me, then this is how Bhagavad Gita transitions into going full into bhakti, into the topic of bhakti.
Yes, yeah, love. Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
If you see me, then you're going to understand this is the object. See, Krishna says, I'm God, the supreme God, but I'm willing and desirous to be your object. I want you to perceive me. I want to perceive you too, but I want you to perceive me. So he's like, if you can look in far enough, you'll see me there. And if you catch a glimpse of me, then you're going to say, that's that. That's the thing I was looking for. That's the taste. That's the feeling. And then your train, like your momentum train, all of a sudden derails. And it just gets hooked by a powerful force, a natural force, the force of bhakti, which is the force of emotions, feelings. It gets hooked onto some divine destination.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
And then they says basically you're scot-free. Then you have a really easy path of spiritual enlightenment before you. The difficult part of spiritual enlightenment is actually getting your eyes not to just focus on the external world, and to be able to start to be more perceptive to what consciousness really is. To study the Vedas is not so easy for people, but you need to study the Vedas, otherwise you're just groping around in the dark trying to look around inside yourself. You might see something that's in there that you think is really deep, but it's just on the surface. Like the mind is very sophisticated. It's easy to mistake for the soul. So if you have a guidance and you have a hope, there's a chance that you're going to actually get in and see Krishna down there. But without that, it's not very hopeful. Without guidance from the Veda, it's not very hopeful that your introspection will be totally, totally accurate.
Yeah, so that perception releases the necessary energy to really cut the cords of the past, let's say, and perceive directly. I think that's really amazing. I think that's what the sages are talking about, and also
Krishna,
living.
He's already talking about this in chapter 2. He's already saying in chapter 2, he already said, you're not going to be able to detach from objects.
Mm-hmm.
He says, actually, rasovarjam rasopya, even if you detach from the object, you still taste it. You still remember the taste of it. Mm-hmm. And that pulls you back to the object. You won't be able to detach from objects unless you get a different object.
Yes.
And we experience that in everyday life. Be totally obsessed with one thing, and then something else happens that we get obsessed with, and we finish with that previous obsession. But we need to be obsessed. That's the nature of consciousness. It needs to be absorbed into some experience. So it's true. It's totally true. It's not until you can actually start to interact with something that's not a Bhuta. Mm-hmm. It's not until you can start to interact with Atma that you have a hope of getting out of the karmic cycle. So that's why, that's why yoga is really important. The actual classic Vedic yoga, where it's inwardly directed meditation, is really important. And that's why study of the Vedas is really important.
I think it's also, if you look at devotees, like a true devotee, and there's, I guess, not many, but if you see one, or you can, then they will tell you that, they meet the guru, and it completely takes away any other desire of becoming one with that, but not from some wish, but from a genuine place of, I'm ready, and then,
that's the role that bhaktas play. Bhakta will be somebody that has some kind of, already got some sort of a taste on that realm. The role that they play is they're existing in a spot that we can perceive. So the role that they play is, for those of us who haven't been able to actually look inward ourselves, we could look at them and say, they got something that I want. It's just a natural way that we look at anybody. He's got more money than I have. This woman's got better boobs than I have, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's the same thing that will happen when you look at a sadhu. You think they have better happiness than I have. And that's the ultimate thing that I want.
Exactly.
And that will pull you. That's usually what starts the person on the spiritual path, is they have somehow or another, through a book, through a movie, just through a fairy tale or a story about a sadhu, they somehow or another meet in person or by hearing somebody who got it. And then It starts us on the path. Actually, it's the second step. The first step is Shraddha, which is to have some receptivity towards that. Receptivity is the most important quality of consciousness. Receptivity is the incoming flow of consciousness. Receptivity is primary, and then the inceptivity results from the receptivity. So the stuff that you bring in is more important than the stuff that you put out, because the stuff that you bring in is going to change what you put out.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow, that was fun.
Great, Vic. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for being here. And yeah, let's talk later. Hopefully.
Okay, great.
Soon. Okay, good luck. Bye.
Thank you so much.